Welcome to Cultivated Live for Thursday, April 4th, 2024. I've been noticing as well that 2024, if you do it backwards, 420 is right in there. So that's pretty cool. But I'm Jay Rosenthal, the co-founder of Cultivated Media and the host of Cultivated Live. Since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first. And we provide the cannabis industry, or we try to, with the most important, insightful, and useful information to our audience. We do that through our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. Go there, subscribe, get in your inbox every morning. And we do it through our daily live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern, which you are, of course, watching on LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you're on LinkedIn and YouTube, join us on LinkedIn, smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We'd love to add you to our daily live stream mix. In a moment, I'm going to bring up Krista Raymer from Vetrina. She's going to talk about pricing in cannabis retail, something that I think we should all listen to very, very carefully. But before we bring Krista up, we're going to run through today's news. Here's what's driving cannabis news today. As you no doubt know, Floridians will vote on legal cannabis this November. The initiative, which is called Smart and Safe Florida, has so far been led and mostly funded by cannabis firm Trulieve. But the initiative raised another $15 million from a few friends in high places. We learned this week that other MSOs are joining the party, and the list is a who's who. Green Thumb Industries, Verano Holdings, Curaleaf, Air Wellness, Cresco Labs, and INSA. It's a mix of the largest U.S. cannabis companies by both revenue and market cap. Now, news of Florida's vote, which came out on Monday, also lifted cannabis stocks higher, which means investors could get handsomely rewarded by playing their cards right as Florida gets to the ballot. Now, support for legal cannabis in the state polls are in the high 60s, low 70s, depending on the pollster that you follow. And cannabis could benefit from being on the ballot with an abortion rights measure, which was also the case in Ohio, because the two issues track pretty closely, or at least did in Ohio. Support for medical cannabis in Florida is also a good proxy, as recreational cannabis tends to track slightly around or the same or slightly below medical cannabis. But the initiative does need 60% of the vote to pass, so it could be a tough fight in November. Now, according to the campaign press release, as we move into the next phase of campaigning, we are grateful to have the support of our donors, i.e. MSOs. We've come a long way, but our work has only just begun. So we will continue to track what is happening with the Florida campaign. Here's what else is happening in cannabis. More than 500 workers at cannabis delivery firm Ease voted to authorize a strike ahead of the busy 420 holiday season. Again, it's the most lucrative shopping day for cannabis companies of the year. That is according to a story in Weed Week. To DC. DC has started issuing warnings for illicit cannabis dispensaries within the city limits. While cannabis is legal in DC, shops aren't allowed to sell the product. Instead, they take advantage of gifting loopholes where the cannabis is gifted alongside the purchase of other items. But because DC isn't a state, it relies on Congress to set the rules governing the industry in some respects, which cannot be a good thing for DC cannabis industry, but we'll continue to monitor what's happening there. And to Maine, where Maine will relax its rules on edibles packaging, according to a story at MJ Biz Daily. We like to see regulators looking at packaging rules for sure, so kudos to Maine regulators. That is what is driving the cannabis news, and what is driving us right now is getting Krista up onto the stage. Krista Raymer from Vetrina, the foremost cannabis retail consultancy in the world. Krista, welcome.
In the world.
In the world. Yeah. I'm not sure I've got through the beginning of the show without taking a breath, but that one, I was on a roll. I didn't want to stop. How are you, Krista?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. You excited about Florida?
I'm excited about Florida. I'm really interested to see what happens there. I am interested to see what happens there because you have so many markets around them that are probably pretty far from any kind of rec environment.
Yes. Someone on a previous show, it wasn't me, so don't skewer me, called the Panhandle of Florida. I think they called it Southern Alabama. Or So I mean, it's a very diverse state. It's a massive state, huge population. As Jeremy mentioned yesterday on our program, what does the coalition look like to get to 60%? Certainly lots of Democratic voters in South Florida. There are a lot of older voters throughout Florida. They love their medical cannabis. There are also a lot of pro-business Republicans who may see the value in this, plus a big push for other ballot measures that are on the ballot. So it will be interesting to watch the politics unfold as well, but certainly a big market with lots of importance. And if they vote yes, more than 60%, it'll be the biggest market that's not named Texas to go legal, and really one of the only big states left.
Well, what's interesting too is I think if you were to pull the tourism-based numbers, Florida outpaces California only maybe like slightly, or they're very, very close. So you have a massive potential customer base that's going through Florida from other states as well as other countries, really, that could be contributing. That is no part of the consideration of how big the medical environment is there today.
It would be good to have the recreational dispensary that is closest to the entrance of Disney World. That is one that was real estate's really going to matter. So I sure someone already has
Site
that real estate
selection.
locked down, but that will be that'll be the one you want to be at for when rec sales go legal that day. But well, good segue. Let's talk about rec sales. Let's talk about
Yeah.
pricing, Krista, because I know you and I talk a lot about it offline for sure. But like,
Mhm.
what have you seen in your vast travels through different markets around pricing and how pricing could be, I guess, improved in cannabis retail?
There's almost like a continuum of learning that depending on where the market is, we can kind of plot either groups and or the market as a general kind of rule of thumb and where they are. The very beginning, groups have a tendency to take their COGS price and put a markup on it and then sell that price to the customer.
Across the
And
board.
then across the board. And like when there isn't a lot of competition or the supply and demand within that regulated space isn't impacting the wholesale costs yet, so we don't see pricing compression yet, then it hypothetically works. Like the customer is maybe sharing their purchases between a rec environment and maybe a legacy space still, depending on what products feel best for them. But when we get into a more saturated environment in terms of what is available in wholesale, which ultimately drives the wholesale prices down, then we start to see retailers evolve in terms of their own pricing strategies and maybe even go from like a keystone markup to a margin optimization strategy per category. So different markups based off of category. Then, as things kind of continue to evolve, then there is an opportunity to adjust those markup strategies, which ultimately results in margin within subcategories. So instead of just having like a standard markup for flour or edibles, now we get into what's our gummy markup, what's our chocolate markup, how do we change and iterate between small format or large format flour. The thing though with all of this is that none of it takes into consideration the customer. And that's a big problem that we see. And we see it in the numbers and the way that they show up on menus. So if we don't optimize the way that the price shows up from a psychological factor for the customer, then we're missing a lot of opportunities in either what could be impacting velocity or actually regaining additional margin dollars, maybe where the customer is willing to spend more.
What I hear you say, because I'm like a newbie to all this, is that you can almost go into a market and say they've been in business 3 months and know exactly where they are in this sort of continuum. They're in the first phase, right? Then they get to the second phase where it's a little bit more nuanced. Then they get to the third phase where it's like maybe like checkers. But my guess is there's probably a part where you like get to playing chess and then three-dimensional chess with your
Mm-hmm.
pricing, so that even within subcategories, brand like markups on X brands are more just like, I would say, I mean, I don't know if it's the right analogy, but almost like a wine list in a restaurant that's been open a long time. They know where they're
Mm-hmm.
getting revenue and the markup and what customers will buy, but they're really factoring in all those things like cost of goods sold, who the customers are, what you have in your menu, maybe a little bit what your competitors are charging. Like it becomes a really involved process. And I guess, like, how long does it take to get to that component of a pricing strategy for a retailer?
I mean, it totally depends on, I think, the market dynamics that are going on, as well as the teams within the retail environment. Like, this takes a lot of energy and focus to be able to do. And you need to also have enough velocity, essentially, SKUs moving in and out to test and iterate to know what's going to work for your customer base. The big call out that we see kind of consistently is that lower price point products are not priced in a way to optimize for additional dollars. So the velocity will still stay quite high, but if you add an extra dollar, say for example, to a $10 pre-roll, is the customer going to purchase it or not? So maybe, maybe not. We need to test and iterate. That's where sometimes discounts and promotions can be very helpful, is you can actually try different price points to see if the velocity changes and then say, did we see an actual movement? Now let's remove the promotion, but keep the price and see if we sustain the same level. Or did the velocity increase because we had it on promotion? Everybody was excited about it. And so with those lower price point products, you can actually add usually an extra cents or dollars on a much higher proportion of the price, driving margin than you could at higher price point products, and they have a tendency to move in terms of velocity. So if you were to increase prices on maybe a concentrate product that's somewhere between $40 and $60, like the customer's not going to not notice that. But how do we basically keep our lower price point products and optimize those margins? There is a big first step that a retailer can take before they kind of try and go and reprice their entire catalog.
And I mean, you're talking about obviously a more careful look at the data, an analysis of the pricing, looking at the data in hindsight once the pricing has changed. Like this is, it is hard work. It is, you need to know what you're doing, but it is also where that $1 on a SKU that has high velocity, that's the profit of the store, right? Like this is not inconsequential things. Like this is the business, right? This is retail.
Yeah. And like when we're talking about large portfolios, to be able to grow gross margins 1% or 2% is a pretty significant move. And so if you can control your operating expenses while basically selling at the same rates or even increasing the amount of sales that you're seeing from the same type of products and controlling your COGS, you're going to be in a much better place. And when we get into more competitive markets, it's now into optimization. So this is where pricing strategy plays a big part of it. And yeah, like at the end of the day, we still are not optimized for the customer. Some numbers feel way better than others, and we just are not playing that game yet. Where you see things like that happen would be places like Costco and Walmart. They're continuously using the cents at the end of a dollar to tell the customer something or to tell their internal team something. So Costco, for example, uses different cents to either tell their customer, tell their team that the product is going to continuously stay in stock or is a seasonal product and is not going to come back.
Tell me what you mean by that. Like if it ends in 97 cents, it means something, where it's 99, it means something else?
Yes. Oh. Yeah. And it is a way for the team in store to know what is going on with the product. And if you're a very educated customer, you also know what's going on with the product. So if you go into your local Costco and they have like white t-shirts all the time, it might end in a certain sense and that one's going to stay. But you walk in and at Easter, maybe they had like Cadbury eggs. Maybe those ones are not going to stay. They'll end in a different sense to tell the teams basically that they're a seasonal product and they're not going to come back in the next reorder. So like, could you imagine how much information you could give to your teams if you just strategically used pricing to tell them messages? Teams are managing really, really long menus with a lot of products, and just giving them more information to understand what the intention is behind the SKUs is very helpful.
Okay, now, I mean, I don't think
I have to look up exactly what the numbers are because I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but I feel like it's like 45 cents if it's going to not come back.
Well, I think that the concept is the same for sure, or understandable. And I think it was last week you also mentioned, like on the promotion side of pricing, like there's a psychological cue you can give to consumers that I think you said even numbers play better. I think also, you know, I just bought one pack of gum at 7-Eleven. She's like, if you get another one, it's $3.99 for two. I was like, oh, that sounds like a deal, but it's actually not a deal. Like they're $2 each. So it's like, I just bought two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that type of cue to a customer pricing as an emotional thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like if something feels good is part of why a customer purchases it. So yes, features and benefits of a product are really important, but also customers get excited about how information is presented. It all happens to all of us. It's like if you go to IKEA and now all of a sudden you want a hot dog, it's like the hot dog is priced in a way that is attractive enough for you to purchase it in that. But they also then put together these deals, and you're like, well, I want the drink too, of course. And so how you position those things becomes really important. And that's like pricing. Pricing is the last indicator of positioning to your customer. And yeah, we're just not optimizing the way that these numbers instead show up in store.
And do you think that's a factor of the newness of operators, the newness of markets, the time on task, like, or is it all those things at each individual store level?
It's all of those things and more. Like this is something that we see in traditional retail as well. This isn't unique necessarily to cannabis. Like pricing and optimization of number presentation is not something that is nailed down in other markets either. Part of the problem is that this has evolved and changed over time. As customers get presented with more prices that look a certain way, maybe they lose their excitement. So like everything used to be priced in 1999 with 99 cents on the end. And that used to work to create a velocity improvement. They're not sure that it's working in the same way. It's not creating the same level of excitement anymore. And so we as people are changing the way that we perceive information. And online websites have been a big part of this as well, as how many prices are we seeing in our day-to-day lives. Like we used to have to go and see a price in store. We wouldn't see prices all day long. And so that's something to consider as well. It's not unique to cannabis, although we have all of those pre-existing unique cannabis things going on, but it's across all retail, really.
Yeah. And even in the most mature markets, I would say for cannabis, like there isn't 20 years of data or 30 years of data, or, I think of the beer stores or the alcohol stores here in Canada or grocery, anything, like they have data upon data upon data upon decades, like days of the year, they know things change. They know pricing models move, and they have some of the dynamism too, but like they just have a lot more data and more people on task to actually analyze what's happening and if it's moving and if not. But I always like to think, and I talk about it all the time, even though you roll your eyes, like at the checkout, like what is the pricing of the things around where you are for the cross sell and the upsell and the adding basket size and that, all those things, right? The features, benefits, pricing, all that factors in.
Yeah, I will. I would add too, it's like we actually have a ton of legacy sales data. Like we have an understanding of what numbers maybe or what price points feel good for most customers for some products, but not all products. And the product has evolved and shifted as well. And we have a group of customers that are familiar with those price points, and then a group of customers who are now purchasing who are not familiar with those price points at all. And you have that converging into one location basically. And so that's where pricing gets very complicated. Is you have a group of customers basically that have no reference, and then you have another group of customers who have legacy reference, and we have people who understand legacy prices. We just don't have the same record keeping around that maybe like grocery or beauty has.
Yeah. And I like to, we're a couple weeks away from 420. People are putting their plans in place. And I feel like I err on the side of caution if I was a retailer around 420, but like any pricing things for 420, like should we just move old inventory? Is that too simple for a
it's a little bit of a simple call out, but it's not a bad call out, to be honest. A lot of the customers who are going to be purchasing during 420 might be your pre-existing customer base, but we see a big opportunity with acquiring new customers here. So it could be somebody who shops already at another location, or it could be like net new customers coming into the industry, taking advantage of the holiday and the promotions. So you basically need to have price points that match those customer bases. So when thinking about like pricing and promotions, there's actually a funnel of thought, and I will share the funnel with you. But basically, it's going to start with what are we trying to achieve and what customer base are we trying to reach with this? And then you funnel down these questions to say at the very end, okay, what is the format of the promotion and how does it need to meet it? And sometimes building promos not around the inventory, but filling the inventory in is more helpful than taking your inventory and deciding what promos to run, because you have more intention behind why you run those promos. So who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to do with it? What's the intention? And then fill it in with the right inventory to fulfill that, instead of saying, I've got all of these pre-rolls that we've been sitting on and haven't been selling in the last 30 days. Let's put them on sale. The other thing to like look out for ahead of 420 would be, what SKUs do you have in store in the last 30 days that you haven't sold any of? You have can you get all of those out? And then what amount of inventory do you have that's sitting like aged past 90 days?
Yeah, it's a lot of consumer, think of the consumer working backwards. There's also a bit of inventory thinking forward to consumer, and sort of how you balance those things on that day. Can I just ask you one more 420 question? Because it doesn't happen all the time that it's on a Saturday, but it is on a Saturday. Are there any special, staffing considerations that people should be thinking about? I mean, I think there's probably let's get everybody in store because it's going to be jammed. But is that the best strategy? Doesn't seem like it would be. But what, are people calling you and saying, what do we do when it's a Saturday 420 when it's just going to be a mob?
Well, the thing too to consider is that the previous 420s haven't necessarily fallen on a weekend. And so we actually saw groups try promotions quite early ahead. Like, we're talking like almost a 1 week in advance, and that you could shop the 420 promos almost like Monday through to the Friday or in the past. But I don't think that there is the same need for that this year, because you would just be pulling and pushing demand, and really, like, people have extended 420 into the weekend to be able to make it accessible for people who are working. We don't have that. So extending it around the Saturday is helpful. Obviously, we want to capture customers and give them an opportunity, but I do think that there is a call out around seeing different level of traffic flow through on 420 than after, and being prepared earlier in the day is probably one of the biggest call outs that we've seen missed historically. Is when we usually look at purchasing of the customer, they have a tendency to purchase kind of like in and around after 3 p.m. and before 8 p.m. is when most sales happen on a day-to-day. 420 has a tendency to be earlier. Now, it could be because of the type of promotions that are being driven, like doorbusters and get it while it lasts kind of moment. But sales do drop off in terms of day and time. And so having the right amount of people in store at the beginning of the day is really helpful. It's also where you find out if all of your discounts and promotions that you built in your POS work properly, and can be a big headache. So having more people there is always going to help with the customer as well as help with the operations of the store that day.
Well, Krista, it's always good to talk shop with you on Thursday mornings. We're going to have you back next Thursday as well. Every Thursday that you're willing to come, we're going to have you, because if nobody else is learning, I certainly am. So I'm becoming a more informed consumer for sure. But also, I like to take what you say, regurgitate it, and make sure that I actually know what I'm talking about. So thank you for making me a smarter cannabis person every Thursday morning. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. Okay, so I need to follow up with you around Costco pricing and an inventory funnel or promotional funnel.
You have some homework. I like it.
Yes.
Krista Raymer from Vetrina, thank you so much. Follow Krista on LinkedIn, especially, and her team, because she drops all the hot knowledge all the time on LinkedIn. So I'll put how to follow her in the show notes as well. Krista, thanks again.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it. That is it for today's Cultivated Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. I'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern for Friday's April 5th show. Remember to buy cannabis at your local dispensary, but also check out the pricing, because they may be telling you slight hints as a consumer, but maybe even they're telling the staff something too. So check that out. Krista, thanks again. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
Thanks, guys.